Okay, I see the meeting is starting to be recorded. Waiting for Dan Bullard and Vicki Liederbrand. Try calling Vicki. Well, she doesn't answer. I know I had an email from her this morning looking for the invitation and I sent it to her. But maybe we should start. Hopefully she'll be joining. If not, I can talk a little bit about rural Minnesota SEP. So I thought we'd do some introductions in the first place. Chet, why don't we start with your introduction?
Great. Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chet Bodine. I am a workforce strategy consultant for the State Department of Employment and Economic Development. It's kind of a fancy title, but basically what it means is that the workforce development system is very complex, and so myself and my team members are liaisons to business community, business owners, industry sector partners, to educate them about what is the workforce development system, collect feedback from businesses about what they think is important for workforce development, bring that back to the system, and try to just advocate for businesses input and voice in the development of workforce programs.
Okay, Dan Bullard, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Oh,
morning,
there you are. Hi, we're just doing introductions. So, Dan, do you want to say who you represent and just as an introduction?
Sure. Dan Bullard with the Initiative Foundation. I work with the small business loan program that we have at the foundation. Our primary service area is a 14-county area throughout central Minnesota. Our main office is located in Little Falls. We serve 14 counties, ranging from the central part to the Wisconsin border area. So glad to be part of your group here today.
Thank you. Cheryl.
Good morning, everyone. Cheryl Hills, Executive Director, Region 5 Development Commission. Happy to be here with friends, serving 5 counties of Crow Wing, Cass, Morrison, Todd, Wadena.
Okay, Vicki Liederbrand, are you on?
Good morning. Can you see me?
Let me just see here.
Yes, Vicki.
Yes. So we're doing introductions.
All right. Good morning. This is Vicki Liederbrand. I'm the Executive Director with Rural Minnesota SEP. I'm really glad to be here today. I know some of you, but not all of you, so it's a pleasure to meet you virtually anyway. We operate 8 career force centers in 19 counties. Our focus is on employment development and workforce development. We operate the career force in Little Falls. Some of you in Morrison County might be familiar with that center. That is one of our 8. Our 19-county area goes up border halfway across west central Minnesota and all the way to the North and South Dakota borders as well. So we have a rather large territory. Our bottom line is to do whatever we can to make sure that we are meeting employers' needs in terms of workforce development, and in terms of a job seeker, we are helping them become work ready and gain the skills that they need to meet today's job.
Okay, thank you, Vicki. Deb.
I'm Deb Bowles with the Little Falls Area Chamber of Commerce. Hello, everyone. The Little Falls Area Chamber of Commerce serves all of Morrison County. We are a membership organization that provides advocacy and support first to our members and then to the greater community.
Thank
That's
you,
it.
Deb. Thank you. Mayor Zilka.
Hi, I'm Greg Zilka, Mayor of Little Falls. I also chair the Economic Development Authority locally. I am on the RDFA, Rural Development Finance Authority. I chair that also. And I'm vice chair of North Central Economic Development Authority and CETA. And I'm also a board member for Sourcewell.
Thank you, Greg. Sandy.
Hi, I'm Sandy Voigt, and I am the director of the Women's Business Alliance. We are hosted, our organization is actually hosted by the Entrepreneur Fund, which is located in Duluth and part of the federal program with a cooperative agreement with the Small Business Administration. When we were asked to create a second Women's Business Alliance and pick a location, we were strongly encouraged by our Economic Development Director, Carol Anderson, and Mayor Greg Zilka to locate here in Little Falls. And so I am pleased to say that we are here. Our office is right across the street from the fire department, and pleased to be here today and share our resources with you.
And I'm Carol Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of Community Development of Morrison County. We are a nonprofit organization that covers all of Morrison County, and we have various loan funds that we can help businesses into the community. I'm also on the Rural Minnesota SEP Board. I'm the chair of the Development Board. I'm on the Minnesota Business Finance Board, and I am also chair of the Executive Committee of Minnesota Farmers Union. So with that, I've asked Chet to kind of give us an overview of the state economy and what's happened since the end of February to as close to present as possible, and then drill that down into Morrison County. So Chet, why don't you take it away?
Okay, thanks, Carol. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
It's fine.
Okay, how's that? Can everybody see?
No, it just says
No.
you're starting to share the content.
It'll take
Okay.
a minute, Chet, for it to load.
There we go.
Great. Okay. Well, as you know, we're getting a lot of data that comes in all the time. The thing we look at most in the state of Minnesota it's been unemployment insurance claims, and I think that's a really good indicator for thinking about the economy because consumer spending in general accounts for 70% of GDP. And so when we're thinking about, people who have a loss in income or expected loss in income, that's going to have a huge effect on, our recovery and just kind of where we're at economically. One tool I've been going to look at how businesses feel about the state of the economy and just kind of what's been happening with them recently is the Census Bureau released a small business pulse survey that they've been working with businesses on a weekly basis to collect information. This is for Minnesota specifically. So you can see how this has changed since the beginning of May until just the end of last week. It's very timely. I think it's really helpful for thinking about just the direction of the recovery. You can see decrease in operating revenues, has gone from 2/3 down to about half in that about a month time span. Supply chain disruptions really haven't changed that much. Sounds like that's pretty much even over that time. Temporary closings has decreased, which is nice to see. Decrease in employees has also decreased. So some companies are starting to bring back employees now. We're seeing that, but we're also seeing that companies that are the rate of decrease has also gotten smaller. So both those are encouraging. The number of hours worked, the number of businesses or percent of businesses that is decreasing, their total number of hours worked has gone down. But interestingly, the percent of businesses who feel that their normal operations will never return has increased over that month. So as this disruption of the economy has continued, more businesses are feeling that their normal level of operations won't return in Minnesota.
Chad, is that their financial projections in terms of normal? Is that being gauged by financial, or is that being gauged by just a different way of working, for instance, remote workforce, et cetera?
Right. So it's in revenue.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty broad question, right? So it's up to them to interpret, right? Like if we have our workforce moving to a lot more to remote, for example, that's going to just change in like our overhead expenses and et cetera. You know, maybe they just think that's not normal, but it does mention revenue in the broader question. So on the flip side of that, you have a household pulse survey that also talks more about on the consumer side. So we can see from businesses, you know, loss of employment, and then on the consumer side, we can see the loss of employment income and how that's changed. So interestingly, the loss of employment income has increased from the end of April to the end of May. But the expected loss of income in the next 4 weeks from the time they took the survey has gone down. We also have some unique spending categories right here. So if they delayed medical care and they're gonna need to spend more on that coming up, you know, we can see if that's changed at all. It hasn't changed, but still 40% of Minnesotans who responded to the survey indicated they were delaying medical care. So that kind of tells me that they're going to be spending on kind of essential needs. A smaller percent are in a position where their housing is situation is kind of unstable, or they have food scarcity. But still, just the fact that, you know, especially the medical care is so high shows that, you know, people are going to be spending money on essential needs, you know, at least during the beginning of the recovery, which will kind of delay or interrupt their normal spending patterns. Again, I just want to emphasize that, you know, consumer spending makes up, again, about 70% of GDP. So that's why these numbers are important. Carol asked me to talk a little bit about Morrison County. So we're going to look at unemployment insurance applicants. So this roughly translates to the number of layoffs in Morrison County since March 15th through June 6th last week. There were 3,847 applicants, which is about 21%, 21.5% of the labor force in the county. Now,
Jeff, does that take in May's numbers?
Yeah, this is all the way through the end of last week, so through June 6th.
Okay.
Now, there's more we need to learn about this number because it doesn't tell us, you know, how many of these were expected to be temporary. You know, I think as businesses start to come back, we're looking to find a way to measure how many people are coming back to work. So what's the difference between, you know, these layoffs in terms of permanent versus temporary? But we do, you know, the state contracts, you know, macroeconomic indicators from IHS, and you know, they are thinking that the unemployment rate is going to stick at about 9%, you know, through this year. So a chunk of these will continue to be permanent for sure. So I drilled down a little bit more into the unemployment insurance applicants, you know, or the layoffs in Morrison County, and just looked at the top occupations in the county that were laid off either temporarily or permanent, and then compared the percent of total in Morrison County to statewide percent to see how, you know, layoffs are affecting specific populations in Morrison County compared to the broader state. So production occupations are the largest percent of layoffs in Morrison County, 11% compared to about 3% of total layoffs in the state. Food and beverage workers is next, which is a little bit higher than the state, but not nearly the difference we see in production occupations, production layoffs. More construction workers are being laid off in Morrison County as a percent compared to the state as well. And then as we move down the list, it's closer to, you know, the state average. Cooks. One that stood out to me, I guess, was also in the production industry was metal workers and plastic workers. 3.5% of layoffs in Morrison County were in that specific category, which was much smaller statewide. Anyway, so this information can help us when we're thinking about getting people back to work. Again, it would be helpful to know, you know, which of these are permanent, which of these are temporary, and we hope to learn more of that over the course, you know, throughout the summer. But as we identify that, you know, we can think about workforce development in terms of, you know, are these people going to have jobs to go back to within the industry, even if it's not at the same employer? Or are we going to think about retraining efforts to move them into similar occupations or occupations that use a similar skill set? So this can give us a lot of insight into, you know, how we think about workforce development and in turn economic development, because right now, and especially with the labor shortage the last couple of years, those things are really tied together. So I'll take any questions I think we got a few more minutes here.
Jed, have the May numbers come out for unemployment yet?
No, so the official unemployment number for May should come out in about a week. And that's different than this. So this is the number of jobs in the county that, you know, workers were laid off from, right? Where the unemployment number looks at your residents in Morrison County and asks them about their employment status regardless of where they work. So if you have a chunk of residents who work in St. Cloud that were laid off, you know, that's where you're going to see some differences in the number. But these speak to jobs that are specifically in Morrison County.
Carol, this is Vicki. When we get the latest unemployment numbers each month, they usually come out, Chet's right, it'll be about a week. They usually come out about the same day that we have our Workforce Development Board meetings, which would be around the 22nd, 24th, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I appreciate this information, Chet, because it breaks it down by versus just plain old unemployment numbers. This really breaks it down well.
And you know, Cheryl, I think this would be good, Vicki too, to have this kind of information county by county, you know, for us to see, just drilling down where it really is. Yeah,
and as the unemployment numbers come out too, we'll also release the full unemployment insurance claims data that also has by industry. So this is by jobs because when someone files a claim, they talk about their jobs, but we don't compile the industry data right away like we do here. But that can also help when we're thinking about targeting or supporting specific industries.
Okay.
Chet, would some of these numbers, like for the production occupations and the metal workers and plastic workers, would those be tied to some specific companies in Morrison County that did some temporary shutdowns or layoffs that perhaps are coming back now?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's why you'll see some of these unique percentages and why I wanted to capture that, because as residents of Morrison County or people that work and live there, I think you guys probably have a better idea about why some of the percentages are different here than they are in the state. We have pretty strict privacy laws, when we're talking about, which businesses are laying off and, why there might be this, you might see this stand out here. So that's not something I can talk about, but I assume that you guys probably can, connect the dots on some of these. And it'd be helpful to know that if you are working with these businesses, are they going to bring back these workers, or are they going to be permanent layoffs? If they are permanent, then we can get in there early and start to give those workers the information they need to start seeking other jobs and hopefully keep them local. So.
Okay. Any other questions for Chet? If not, let's just go around the group here and talk about what your perspectives are from the area that you represent. And so maybe we'll start with Dan Bullard. Dan, are you there? Did you unmute yourself?
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can hear you.
All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, probably most of my perspective will be related more to our loan portfolio, because that's the area that I work with most directly. What we did initially when the pandemic first hit is we offered a deferment of payments for a 3-month period to our entire portfolio. And again, this would be kind of across our 14-county region, but obviously include Morrison County as well. We had about a third of our portfolio opt to accept the deferment, which was for us was like $2.8 million of loans that were in deferment for that time period. So in April, May, and June, payments are deferred. The intent is that we'll resume payments starting in July, and we'll just kind of have to take a look at and kind of see what circumstances were. In addition to that, we then also got involved with a loan program through the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, their Small Business Emergency Loan Program, related to the businesses that were initially forced to close by the governor's executive order. Primarily, those would be businesses in the food and beverage industry, like the restaurant and bars, those in cosmetology, like the hair salons, nail salons, and then also some of the fitness centers. And I know Region 5 also was a significant participant in that program as well. We processed 55 loans for a total of $1.2 million in that 2-month time period. I did take a quick look, and out of that, it looks like 9 of those were in Morrison County. So Morrison County had a little higher representation than most of our other counties. Again, we serve 14 counties, so a good percentage there, and a lot were in kind of the food and beverage industry. We started to have some conversations with folks about kind of what they're seeing, and certainly there's concern, obviously, related to the fact that the reopening is probably occurring slower than what was originally hoped for anyway. But so I think it's a little early for us to tell exactly kind of what we're going to do for the performance. Besides that, I know the foundation was involved in a number of different grant programs, both on some community-based aspects, but also passing through some dollars from the state on some childcare facilities. I believe I want to say we did over 100 grants to different childcare organizations as well. So that's kind of the information I have to share with you at the present time.
Okay, who should we do next? Deb, how about you? What are you seeing in the chamber?
The catchphrase I've been using is we're all in the same storm, but not in the same boat. We have had some businesses that have thrived in the COVID-19 pandemic and some not so much. Little Falls has beautiful new streets on Highway 27, streets and sidewalks that were put in last year. And we're finding some of those businesses along that stretch of road didn't have the income that they could have had in 2019, and that impacted some of their ability to get small business administration loans. And I don't know the specifics of that because I didn't get in between our businesses and their banker, but I did hear that from two different businesses. Other piece, concern about how quickly the government put in place that extra $600 of unemployment on top of regular unemployment wages. And it's difficult.
Whoops.
Making more money, staying home with that extra $600 boost. So if that does go up at the end of July, we may have something a little bit better to get these workers back. Hearing from our contractors, they don't have new homes that they're building, but there's lots of remodeling going on. So people are investing in their homes and infrastructure that way. We are seeing mental health issues with our business owners, that the stress that this has put on them as they know they need to support their workers during this time and who is supporting them. So I have spent a lot of time on the phone with some of our business owners just talking because they need to say things out loud. And the companion piece to that is the workers that are juggling a job and we're trying to do the distance learning and to give their children that education while they weren't in that classroom setting. Little Falls Community Schools is going to make a decision on July 15th, what they think they're going to do. And if you heard any of the results of the survey they sent their parents, overwhelmingly parents say, please take my child back because we don't want to educate them at home anymore. And just that social aspect of going to school as well. If you were part of the fast food industry, you did very well. Our bars and restaurants, of course, are still struggling to open. The Minnesota Chamber has taken very strong leadership on talking to Governor Walz about we need to get our businesses back open. And there is a letter going to the governor today, again, stressing the importance of getting our businesses open and reducing the restrictions and letting us figure it out. And we do know the repercussions of that if there is a spike again in COVID-19, but the businesses feel that they can handle that. The last thing I have pertains more to the Little Falls Arts and Crafts Fair. We are hoping that we will be able to host that event in September. But talking to vendors, they initially were having difficult time getting raw product out of China with the embargo that was put on. And as they were shopping in the United States then, they were looking at, our items used to be $30 to $50 that they were selling. With the increased costs of made in America products, they were looking at $70 to $90 for that same type of product. And they did not know if they had a market at that price point. And I don't know how that's going to roll over to our Main Street businesses. We do know that some items just will not be available for sale anymore because our manufacturers are looking at what their price leaders are. The grocery stores especially, you're going to start seeing less items on the shelves, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. but they are looking at what their profit margin is. That's about where I'm at. Chamber staff's been working part-time, so when I hear the unemployment figures and give that number, is that total unemployment, or is it people like my staff that are half-time working and half-time drawing unemployment? Was my only question. That's it.
Hey, thank you. Cheryl, what do you see happening in Region 5?
So, great report, both Dan and Deb. That was really good. And I had several points here that Deb brought up, so I'm not going to regurgitate any of those. The only thing that maybe wasn't mentioned thus far is healthcare and the layoffs of nurses in healthcare and the stresses on obviously that industry as well. And so that's one area that I don't think was previously mentioned that I'm seeing is also an economic impact to all of our communities, and with the least impact to Cass County, frankly, for not having a healthcare facility in the northern part of that county is the one that's probably least. But focusing on Morrison County, I think healthcare is another big issue. The other area that is the community college. We haven't talked much about that, but I know that there will be some significant hurdles in their budgets, which will have an impact trickle down to teachers and to more families. I don't know if it'll really touch the numbers that Chet shared or the unemployment numbers, but I do know that just fiscally it'll impact workforce, no doubt, in terms of training opportunities through Central Lakes College anyway, because President Harris Charlier has said that they're probably into maybe a 4-year deficit as a result of COVID, and how that plays out in terms of programs and what's able to be offered, which has an impact later on our qualified workforce, as you all know. So those two areas I don't recall Deb mentioning, but the rest are all absolutely the stress levels, not only of the employees, but the employers, as she stated, but the employees as well. The remote working and as she's already mentioned, trying to juggle that with being a teacher and an employee at the same time. But so many of our families are facing that, and that's what I'm witnessing a lot of as I talk to businesses. I think that's what you wanted to know right now versus our programs, correct, Carol? Because I could talk about the programs, but I think you wanted to go around the horn first and
Correct.
just what we're observing. I think those are the main things that I'm observing, and there's a lot unknown still as in terms of where we'll be able to recover, and then where there are a lot of folks predicting that we're going to have more of an issue if there is a resurgence, as has happened in some states, of COVID, and our healthcare systems seem to be able to deal with the capacity at this time, our healthcare providers, but that's concerning as well. I think that's weighing on a lot of people. And the very last thing I'll mention is the investors that I talk to, the larger investors that do business investing, they're holding on to everything because they don't know whether they're going to have to help their family or their pet businesses, projects. And so there is, you're starting to see some holdings in terms of investments, which will have a long-term impact on recovery.
Thank you, Cheryl. Vicki, what are you seeing in SEP's territory? I mean, we've got our offices that are just starting to open again. But what kind of activity are people coming in looking for job help?
Well, actually, yes, we are going to do our soft opening beginning June 22nd. We are currently and have been offering services all along via remote and virtual technology, but we're going to start opening by appointment only on June 22nd. And so what we're really seeing right now, well, first of all, regarding businesses in the economy, what Cheryl just got done speaking about and what Chet spoke about, I'm actually seeing that throughout the entire region, not just in Morrison County. So, you know, both of you are spot on with what we are seeing as well. We don't know either how many of those businesses are the economic downturn that COVID has cost them. We have other businesses that are beginning to rehire, but and this was demonstrated in Chet's information. They're actually hiring back at less. Some of them at less than what the wages were that those folks were laid off at. So that's kind of interesting. Conversely, we are also seeing some businesses that are hiring higher because of the demand for the labor. So it depends on the area and it depends on the type of business. But to get back to your question, the majority right now, what we're seeing is applicants for unemployment insurance, or what we call UI. And that's understandable, due to the extra benefits that are available from the federal government, that $600 extra. One thing to remember, though, is if the employer calls the employee back to work and the employee refuses because they want to stay on unemployment until that runs out, they will lose their job their unemployment benefits, because they cannot refuse work if they're called back while they're on unemployment. And a lot of folks don't realize that. So that's something that, we do need to remember, that if the business wants them to come back to work, they need to respond to that, or they will no longer be eligible for unemployment. So we are, and unemployment, of course, in our area is almost all online. So it's rather difficult for some folks to understand the complexities of applying for unemployment. And some of the folks, frankly, have never been unemployed before. We're seeing an entirely different demographic where folks have not been unemployed before. These are professional people, and they have no idea where to start. And so a lot of our work has been with them, to be able to help them navigate the system. Although we are not unemployment, they are one of our partners. And we've been able to step up on their behalf. What we're fully expecting to see, though, is especially once those unemployment benefits end at the end of next month, that's when we believe we're going to begin to see an influx or a surge of the demographic that we call dislocated workers. Now, the dislocated worker is the person who is laid off. We've been gearing up, and we do offer dislocated worker services, several of them. So we've been gearing up in preparation for that, and I'm fully expecting to see a surge in the fall, and then I'm expecting to see another surge towards the end of the year, largely because of the way the pandemic models have been projected. I could go on and on, but I'll stop there, Carol. If anyone has any questions, I'm very happy to answer.
Okay. Let's move on to Sandy.
Hi, Carol. Thank you so much, and thank you for letting me be part of this panel. To just talk a little bit about our initial efforts and work that we did, I tried to be an actual live voice and an ear when people were trying to figure out exactly what was going on. There was a great deal of confusion and fear, and being part of the SBA local network, received several different calls trying to figure out and navigate this thing called EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the cash advance that was coming, the loans, the PPP program and how that was being administered, and then the actual sole proprietors who it took a little while for the unemployment insurance to be able to, through the pandemic, to be able to kick in. And so there was concerns, rightfully so, from financial things like that have kind of slowed down now a bit as people have gotten some of the financing and programs that are there. But one of the things that I want to make sure that I mention throughout this is especially as we're trying to look at preparing for potentially another wave of this, some additional kinds of reductions in revenue and or either potential additional financial assistance. One of the things that I believe has been one of the hardest barriers for some of our small businesses has been their lack of prepared financial statements. And every either loan or grant program has wanted you to submit your financial statements, your current financial statements, electronic tax returns, profit and loss, a balance sheet. And many of our businesses, perhaps they have them, they certainly didn't have 2019 prepared and ready yet because this happened in March. They don't have the computer savvy knowledge, perhaps the capacity to be able to just automatically go in, click on a website, complete their online application, attach their documents and get it submitted. And so many of these programs have operated on a first come, first served basis that if you didn't have that and you weren't ready to respond, you kind of got left out of the cold. So in many of the cases, a lot of the work that I've done has been trying to kind of work with people to get them on a, paper and pencil kind of way to get their applications and things completed. So anyway, I keep always going back to the work that Carol always tried to do about saying we need a traveling CFO to be able to go out and help these businesses make sure that they're ready. And to me, that's one of the preparedness when we're talking about our employer preparedness plans. We need them to be ready and prepared with their financial statements in formats that they can upload and immediately submit these applications. Facebook has done grants. There's just this whole wide variety, but if you don't get your stuff in right away, it doesn't do any good. So anyway, that's my soapbox on that one. But again, just trying to navigate through all of those programs. The Entrepreneur Fund itself was one of the lenders that did the small business emergency loan programs. Those, again, went almost immediately, I'm sure, as Dan and Cheryl can attest to also for our region. And we've done a variety of webinars. The Women's Business Alliance has done weekly webinars on things like the employer preparedness plans, cleaning, disinfecting, sanitizing, online stores, financing. We have one on the 24th of June to how do you make sure that you get your preparedness or your PPP program forgiven. And what are the rules and regulations? Because, and frankly, every time I answered a question to someone that called, the next half an hour, it had changed. So it is a very fluid situation that we just need to continue to stay active and participate in.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Next will be Mayor Greg Zilka because he has done yeoman's work here in Little Falls helping businesses. So Greg, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, hang on. First of all, I have to apologize to Carol because I didn't mention community development in my list, and I was off that board for about 45 minutes, and then we found a way to keep me on it through being the chair of RDFA. But Carol was a large part of everything I do. We communicate so often we finish each other's sentences. So we started out with our EDA meeting every Friday because we recognized the problem early, and we wanted to help the small businesses that were adversely affected by this. And like Deb said, some of them were hurt last year with the Highway 27 project. And we found out that there was a lot of discourse and need out there, but there was also a lot of appreciation, because even for some of the little things that we did, just to show that we cared, we put out picnic tables by the bars and restaurants, and we got 400 likes on Facebook because we did that. But more impactful, we came up with a $5,000 loan package, and originally it was just a loan. We were going to defer for 6 months, and I can't remember what the payments were going to be, how many, but it was 0%. And we really want to help. Well, the next Friday we met, and I brought up I didn't think that was enough. Let's find a way that we can forgive half of it. So we went with a loan grant. And now if they make the first 18 payments, the second half is forgiven. So they actually receive a grant. They can pay it off immediately. So we can hand them a check and they can hand us one and call it good. So at this point, we are about to hit 50 businesses for a total of $250,000 loaned out, half of which we will get back, but $125,000 injected into our small businesses. And I'm hearing nothing but great things from them about the fact that we're doing that. I did read, I believe, that Brainerd actually is up to 90,000, and that Sauk Rapids is up to 45,000. And Carol would tell you that we were ahead of the curve. There's people copying what we've done. And so we're really proud of that. We prorated liquor licenses. We deferred existing loans in EDA and community development. We closed the alley for a local business just to use, so they'd have some contiguous space to have seating. So when the outdoor part could be open, they had a place to be able to do that. We were willing to do that with our public parking lots, but nobody requested it. I've also been doing weekly emails and conversations with Congressman Stauber and his assistant Isaac Schultz, discussing the $500,000 that the city has in a LMI HUD fund from deed dollars that has restrictions, and begging for them to okay that for all cities, not just Little Falls, but Minnesota, United States. The things that we could do with those dollars would be incredible. With Carol's urging, I've been communicating with Stauber to try to help with Central Minnesota Renewables and the sale of that, and the impact that that would have on our farmers and the employment that would bring to our community. I also found out that the governor's not that hard to get a hold of. I sent an email to his assistant, Patrick Tanis, and 2 hours later, I received a phone call from the governor's office, and they said that they liked my solution-oriented conversation. So rather than trying to browbeat my way in, I just told them, this is what we need. And in my mind, I believe that it helps. I've also referred a lot of businesses to Carol, Sandy, and Stephanie and the Initiative Foundation. And I have to tell you, each and every one of those that I've mentioned, including Cheryl also, have worked their butts off to try to help and save these businesses and livings for people. So can't say enough thanks for all that you have all done. I also almost weekly have emails, calls, and conferences with Krisha, Gazelka. So just a lot of things going on. And now I'm hearing so much positive because the needle is moving forward for these businesses and they feel like there's some hope. So just showing you care me has impact, but obviously money has a bigger one. That's it.
Okay, and I'll just wrap up here shortly. And then we'll get into what programs we have quickly that could help. We have loans with 21 businesses, and immediately I sent letters out. The board authorized me to do the approvals to defer loans for 3 months for whoever wanted it. I only had 4 businesses take me up on it. So the other thing I did, I was working from home, and so I transferred all my office phones to my cell phone. Boy, in the beginning, I mean, I never got off the chair, I was just constantly talking to people. And like Deb said, some of them just need to talk. And they were calling me in the evenings, they were calling me on the weekends, and I talked to them because they, I realized how important that is. A lot of them were the cosmetologists. They were really the ones that I was getting a lot of calls from the very beginning. I was on daily state calls with the Department of Economic Development, Commerce, and Labor and Industry and Revenue. Then I was transcribing my notes and sharing them with the mayors and Little Falls Business Association, my board. And then they dropped to 2 times a week, and now it's once a week. So, that's a good sign. I also wrote some weekly columns in the Morrison County Record talking about the programs and how they've changed. So, that's what I've done. And Sandy and Cheryl and Dan, you guys were getting the calls because although we didn't have anything but our own loan funds to lend, I was referring them to Sandy or to Dan or to the bank or up to Stephanie. And so I know Sandy got a lot of them. And yes, some of the downtown businesses here lost money last year because of the close down. And they ended up not qualifying for any of the loans other than the city loan program. And that helped them pay their bills. So, and the city, I mean, we've done 43 loans already. And so I really give kudos to the city of Little Falls. Everybody, it's true, we're copying us. When I talk to my counterparts, they say, well, how did you do that? Can you share it with us? And now they've made 1 or 2 loans, and so you got to be careful too, you got to do these things quick. You can't, spend all your time in doing the due diligence. The EDA knows that you might be losing some, but at least we're going to try. So I guess with that, I will turn it over back again. If we can quickly just say what types of programs we have, is there money still available? And then we'll do a wrap. So Dan Bullard, are you still there?
I think he lost his audio.
I am. I lost my audio briefly, but if I'm on the phone, hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
Okay. I'm not quite certain how this is going to work necessarily, but I believe starting today there's a special session of the legislation, of which one of the topics I believe will be related to putting more funds into some of these emergency loan programs, such as we previously had. What I'm hearing is that the discussion is centering around funds coming to the state from a federal source, I think through the CARES Act, and so that rather than the funds coming out in the form of loans, that they potentially would be issued to small businesses in the form of grants instead of loans. Hopefully that would then obviously diminish the amount of underwriting that would need to be done. The previous loan program had a maximum loan amount of $35,000. I believe these grants can be limited to, but half of that loan was potentially forgivable. I believe these grants are going to be capped at a maximum of $10,000 per applicant, but there potentially is quite a bit more money coming into that program. Not all the details are out on that yet, obviously, since it just is being under negotiating right now. But so I would say stay tuned both to our website and probably Deed's website related to that. My sense on that is that there's going to be a ton of potential applications on that, and they might process that a little bit more on a lottery basis rather than a first come, first served basis. So more details come into that, but we'll just have to kind of wait and see what's happening there.
Hey, thank you, Dan. Yes, and I heard that also on the state call here the other day, that they're looking to replenish that fund. Cheryl, what do you have available?
We, as Dan and Alice said, we did the Small Business Emergency Lending Program, and we dispersed about $1,400,000. I think we're close to hitting that $1,500,000 mark. We opted to not do any more deed monies going forward by the end of June, because we also received $1,450,000 from EDA on a non-competitive basis for lending. We'll come out with that lending criteria, but it will be extremely favorable, but likely 0% loans with interest for periods of 15 years. So pretty favorable terms, but I can share more about that. And those will be prioritized to industries that, yes, were hit by the closure, the governor's closure, but also others like agricultural industries and others that weren't able to get into the deed small business emergency lending program. And we will likely ask employers to commit to and giving us some sort of information about livable wages of their employees and benefit structures as well, because if they're getting favorable, extremely favorable terms, then we're hoping that businesses will trickle some of that to the employee base, which will help our economies as well, our local economies. So that's some dollars that we'll be pushing out relatively soon. As like all of you, we did the deferments on like 30 or 40 loans. We did all that normal stuff that we did, that all of you did on our existing portfolio. What's going forward in addition to that is I wanted you all to know that EDA also did some non-competitive dollars to the economic development districts, of which we are, for some pandemic planning going forward. So whether that's important or not, I just want to let you know it. But the public works dollars, the 1.5 billion that the feds put into EDA alone, that's going to be a lot of projects. Then we're interested in more projects. It's important that Vicki hears this as well. It doesn't matter if those projects are workforce training kinds of programs and projects, or if they're infrastructure by way of business park infrastructure or other infrastructure, even including broadband infrastructure. So it's very, very broad, but the typical kinds of match and the things that we see on the public works dollars from EDA are being really favorable. They've been shifted as a result of the CARES Act. So that's important to note. We'll be getting more information out about those public works dollars through EDA. We probably have 2 or 3 projects we'll be assisting with, one with Leech Lake Band and some others in the region. So I wanted to make sure this group heard that. Lastly, I think the one thing I'll mention is that we've been doing a lot of like a boatload of grant writing. And so we are working specifically for Morrison County. We transitioned a project that was going to be in Crow Wing County to the city of Little Falls for a Department of Defense grant with zero match to work on childcare. And John Rademacher, the city administrator, is guns blazing on that one. So he's really got that one under control, which will help the workforce, by the way, if we have affordable access to childcare. With a focus on military families and Camp Ripley, so it will be soldiers, which has a big impact on your communities as well in Morrison County. So that project we're working on with John to make sure he's really competitive there. Working with the state Minnesota Department of Agriculture, some dollars to ag and farmers. I won't go into that much deeper. And then lastly, Minnesota Power has been working with the PUC to deploy more solar to bring back some of those construction jobs. There is one project that may be slighted in Morrison County from Minnesota Power that they'll recommend, but primarily what I'm seeing is majority of those will be in Crow Wing County and Cass County. That said, construction jobs are construction jobs, and we don't live in these boundaries. And so if we can get those folks back out into those places, that's good for all of us. So those are a few projects and grants that we're cooking. That's all the time I have now, Carol, but there's a lot more going on.
Okay. Greg, do you want to talk about what we still have here in Little Falls, and then we'll go to Vicki and Sandy.
Yes, we have money to help probably another 20, 25 businesses. We are, we're actually, I'm driving up and down the roads through town every day trying to pick out a business that I don't think has been contacted yet. And Lori Casella, who I have to thank John Rademacher and Lori Casella also, because they're a big part of this. They're doing a lot of the same work, and it wouldn't be happening without them, just like the rest of the people I mentioned. And the other thing I would mention, Carol might have mentioned it if I didn't, but Barrett Pet Innovations, they are ahead of schedule, so that'll be more job opportunities in our community, which is a great project. So money to lend, and with grants is half of it. So if you know anybody in the city of Little Falls, small business affected by COVID, send them our way.
Thank you. Vicki, what do you have for employment programs?
Yes, for employment programs, as you know, we're affiliated with the Career Force Centers. We are not the state, we're a private nonprofit, but we operate the Career Force Centers here in this area, including the Little Falls. And so we look at connecting job seekers and employers and making sure that the training and skills are up to par with what is demanded by our employers. Now, I could speak to you for hours about our different programs, but what I really want to do is just summarize that we offer programs to assist folks from youth all the way up to senior citizens in terms of either looking for work or finding training in order to become employed or to upskill their current training so that they can maintain their employment. On the employment side, we're working closely with employers in terms of assisting them find these qualified workers. So some things that I wanted to point out today is one of the things that we have been changing in light of the pandemic is how we provide those services. So we have been beginning to offer what we call virtual career fairs. In other words, employers can come onto a virtual platform and demonstrate information about their company, you know, and what types of jobs they might have available and that sort of thing to a number of job seekers. And then hopefully, you know, that helps make some connections. Some of the other things that we're doing is offering space so that an employer can actually come onto one of our businesses and they can do virtual interviewing, you know, where the candidate would be at their home, you know, if they have access to the computer, and then the employer can do the interviewing and that sort of thing. We've got a couple of those going on right now. The other thing that I wanted to make people be aware of is we do have some limited funds for incumbent worker training. So if a business is finding, especially as a result of the pandemic, that they need to upskill their people or they need to provide another type of training in order to prevent a layoff or a furlough, we do have a limited amount of training dollars that we can assist them with. And then, of course, we offer the on-the-job training program in which an employer, we connect an employer with a job seeker that has the skills they're looking for. And it's what I call a try before you buy program for the employer. So we pay the wages while they're in the training with the expectation that if all goes well, the employer will then hire that person. But in the meantime, the employer has the opportunity to train that person and show them the job and get to know that person before they actually make the commitment to hire them. We offer a number of other services. Of course, we offer the labor exchange through Minnesota Work and the careerforce.com platform that employers can use, and you can actually put your profile on there, and that is accessible to all job seekers actually throughout the state. So we know that while we're just talking about Morrison County right now, we also know that, you know, we have, Chet, what do you call that? Commuter patterns, you know, where people are moving in and out of areas. And so the more employers can, the broader area that employers can reach, the more opportunity they have to find someone who will meet their needs. So I can go on probably forever talking about employer services, but you know, please know that if you or your businesses are looking for qualified employers, let us know, have them connect to the local workforce center. If there's anything we can do, we can also make referrals to many of the programs that those here have been talking about, you know, as well as other programs that they might not be aware of, such as disability services and employer seminars, you know, labor market analysis, and even veterans, if they're interested in putting a priority of hiring vets, we can connect them as well. So when you're thinking employment, when you're thinking workforce development, whether it's on the side of a job seeker or the side of employer, think of rural Minnesota STEP in your local career force center. I know that sounds like a commercial. I really don't mean to be an ad, but you know, we do it all, and if we're not the person that does it, we know who will, and we'll connect you with that agency.
Okay,
Any questions?
no questions. How about Deb? Does the chamber have anything that they're helping with?
We don't have financial support. The chamber was very proactive in advocating for property tax deferment. And we've seen that across the board with a lot of our counties, and that was very helpful. So we weren't able to put money in pockets immediately, but they can hang on to what they got for a little while longer.
Okay, thank you. Sandy?
Thank you. Again, the Entrepreneur Fund does have the SBA microloan programs that they're doing that comes with a lot of those benefits. But one of the things that the Women's Business Alliance is really focusing on is our one-on-one technical assistance services. And that's really being able to match expertise, external expertise with the needs of the businesses. And we can pay for those services. So if you have businesses that need to work on their marketing plan, we can bring in a marketing expert to assist them with developing their plan, or perhaps assisting with their CFO and preparing their financial statements. And we have resources to be able to assist that. They're not direct cash into the businesses, but trying to get them that expertise that they need. And just to hopefully perhaps end on a higher note, I have seen a lot more individuals that are looking at for assistance to try and start their businesses, and working with, again, some of my other colleagues as they are trying to move forward and either start their own or buy an existing business.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. And at community development, we have our regular loan fund that we can help out with. We also help administer the county's Rural Development Finance Authority loan. And you know, you have to start thinking as when we're coming out of this, what are we going to have to help businesses come out of this, or new businesses start, or perhaps buy another business? So we're there with those fundings. And of course, I'm always interested now in the displaced worker funding that would be coming through from the state and the feds, because I think we're going to be needing that. I don't think that all of the people are going to be getting hired back again, and we need to help with retraining. I have to believe that there's going to be retraining to do the testing and the tracking. There's a huge need for that. Also on the ag side, we've been working with Central Lakes College to do a meat cutters class through their culinary program. We've all seen the hogs that needed to be euthanized, because we can't let that happen again with that bottleneck in agriculture. And I've been working, Commissioner of Agriculture Peterson is getting, he's going to try to direct some of the CARES funding that the state may be getting to help with some of these small town locker plants, or with this training program at Central Lakes to get people trained and help them get in business. So we did kind of run over a little bit. Did I miss anybody? Anybody else want to say anything? We had our contact information was up. Anybody watching this, it will be rebroadcast. And please feel free to talk to any of us if you have questions or opportunities. And thank you all for taking the time today.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Carol.
Carol,
Thanks,
a lot.
everybody. Have a safe weekend.
Yep, bye.
Bye.